SCP-001, A Portrait of Hell, Part 2. A corpse is endlessly burning inside of Site-01, and not just any corpse. It belonged to one of the Overseer Council members, and it's such a threat that it bears the highest classification in the Foundation, of SCP-001. We know that the corpse belongs to a talented man named Yoshihide, but how he ends up in that position is still a mystery, aside from the administrator being directly involved. With Part 2, we'll delve more into Yoshihide's road to becoming an O5, and what brings him to his end. Let's take a look. We pick things up by moving on to Act 2, The Path of Swords. In his daydream, between the long hours of the work, Yoshihide pushes a cart up a hill. He is 8 years old again, sitting on the outskirts of his village. The wind brushes past his face as the clamor of construction rings out around him, reverberating past the howls of the rushing air. Caked around his legs, mud bubbles and crusts into a thick layer, the viscous substance arresting his movement, but only slightly. He trudges along, grinning, watching the workers busy around him. He's not old enough to understand what they're building yet. It doesn't matter to him. What does matter, what utterly captivates his attention, is the cart carrying piles of dirt far beyond the skyline. He watches them push the dirt along the track off into the distance every day after school. It's the first thing he does as soon as he gets home. One day, as the tall men before Yoshihide laugh and work, curiosity gets the better of him. He hops down from the rock he sits on and stumbles towards them past the piles of wood and steel stacked neatly into clusters. The two notice his approach, and the taller one, a man of darker complexion than his companion, bends down to meet him. He smiles at him and asks if he's lost. Yoshihide blinks several times, getting the sun out of his eyes, before pointing to the cart. He takes a few moments to find the words he wants to say, but he eventually seizes them. He exclaims that he wants to push the cart. The man turns to his friend with a smirk that can only be understood with the retrospection of adulthood. After a moment's pause, in one swift motion, he rises to his feet and waves his hand towards it, telling the boy to come along then, as the cart isn't going to push itself. Yoshihide can hardly contain his excitement as he clambers up to the cart, right between the two men who have now assumed position. The sun shines warmly on him, the rays casting their dull heat, as they begin to count 1, 2, 3, and push the cart with all their might. Without a moment's delay, it begins to roll forwards, inch by inch at a time, until Yoshihide can hardly keep up with its gathering momentum. As it continues to roll, his footing loosens, and Yoshihide falls, and jerks himself to attention, catching himself. The room spins around him momentarily, before his gaze refocuses and drifts towards the ink and paper littered across his desk. The sun drapes light over the room in distinct, lazy streaks, illuminating the countless bits and pieces of paperwork that occupy his time, day in and day out. And in the center of the mess, in the eye of the storm, the 001 document beckons towards him mockingly, waiting for his inevitable attention. It takes him just slightly too long to realize that he's not alone. Beyond the open door of his office, in the vestibule where his secretary lies, a familiar face stares calmly through him, waiting for the first signs of recognition. It takes Yoshihide no more than a quarter of a second before he puts the eyes to a face. His grip tenses. The administrator. The man rises perfunctorily and walks in a way that betrays no underlying agenda for his impromptu visit. The light casts off his skin as he approaches, but it does not glow with warmth. The same pale, cold features are still as discernible as when they were bathed in darkness. No new life breathed into them. He sits and wastes no time. He hopes that he did not arrive at an inopportune moment, as he recognizes that Yoshihide has been under much duress since their last encounter. The director glares cautiously at the man and remarks that his presence is certainly not helping in that regard. The two sit in silence briefly. The administrator does not grace him with a smile anymore, the stone complexion of his face remaining wholly inert. He apologizes and says that he merely came to inquire about his progress on the SCP-001 containment case. The silence continues now, as Yoshihide articulates his thoughts. If there's tension palpable in the air, the administrator doesn't seem to feel it. He finally says that he intended to begin the containment efforts tomorrow. Now the administrator smiles, his perfect white teeth peeking out from behind the lightly lifted folds of his face. He states that that is the correct response, and perhaps there is still hope for him yet. Yoshihide grunts but doesn't reply. He's not sure if it's meant to be a joke. Regardless, the administrator eagerly anticipates his inevitable solution to their ongoing problem. He casts a forlorn glance down at the epicentral paper, nestled deep in the mess of the mahogany desk. The particularities of this anomaly continue to elude their organization, and if there's any hope in a solution, it will be through Yoshihide. The manner of enunciation makes him shiver in his place. He tries not to show any sign of discomfort to the facsimile of a man before him. Instead, he tells him that he appreciates the sentiment. Another off-putting smirk, and his hand extends towards the document. The document. He picks it up, turns a few pages, then begins to read. SCP-001 refers to an anomalous corpse, hanging within a containment chamber at Site-01, entrapped within a cocoon of silk threads. SCP-001's cocoon has thus far proven impenetrable. Attempts to damage the exterior have proven futile. Blood continuously flows from between the threads on its body, at a rate of approximately 5 liters per day. SCP-001's primary anomalous effect occurs at random. At an average incidence of once per day, a silk thread with identical composition of SCP-001's cocoon will manifest around the middle finger of a member of Foundation personnel. This individual is labeled SCP-001-A. Over the course of 48 to 72 hours, the silk will continue to coil around 001-A, extending from the location of manifestation. The speed of the silk's growth varies between subjects, though typically immobilizes them within 24 hours. Once 001-A has been wholly cocooned within the silk, it will begin to constrict around them. This process lasts approximately 3 hours, during which blood will begin to seep from between the strands at increasing rates. Once 001-A expires, the cocoon will become inert, and the silk will lose its anomalous properties. Thus far, over 85 Foundation personnel have been terminated in this manner. He speaks with almost no emotional intonation, the gruesome information being relayed with near-perfect poise. Yoshihide, for that matter, does not react either. He recognizes such treachery would not be tolerated by this man. The administrator quietly places the document back down and re-establishes eye contact, asking Yoshihide what he makes of it. It's a test, one that Yoshihide is perfectly prepared to answer. He can feel the fire in his eyes glowing hot as the portrait forms in his head. He states that all reasonable manners of conventional penetration have likely proven futile in breaking into SCP-001's cocoon, so primary investigation into 001 should first and foremost focus on mitigating its effects in the short term. He pauses before continuing, asking if, amputation has been considered. A smile blossoms on the administrator's face. It appears genuine this time. He replies that yes, it has, though no one has thus far been willing to try it. Yoshihide says that he will be the first then. It's a statement of fact, not a question. Something changes in the air, but the administrator's smile does not falter. He says that Yoshihide will be indeed, and he looks forward to seeing his progress report next week. And with no further comments, the administrator lifts himself from his seat and reaches over for a handshake. Yoshihide grasps the cold, lifeless husk in his hand, and they shake. Then he is gone, briskly whisked away as though never present, as though the meeting was nothing more than an ephemeral dream. Yoshihide stands, processing for several seconds longer. The sun's beams constrict silently in the ensuing moments, before disappearing entirely. He leans back, collapsing towards his chair, and lands explosively in the mud, splashing the brown across his clothes and face. The men stop their pushing to turn back, and begin to chuckle as Yoshihide looks up. Seeing them laugh, he begins giggling too, and quickly pushes himself to his feet, though slips again, prompting more laughs. The second man chimes in and tells Yoshihide to take a break. He's been working very hard, and he's covered in mud now, so he should hop into the cart and they'll push him. Anticipation overwhelms Yoshihide as he gingerly attempts to climb the minecart's sides. The first man helps push him up, and soon he sits upon the mounds of dirt, overlooking the world from a bird's-eye perspective. He can see farther than he ever could on the ground. The boy resolves in that instant to never again step down from the cart. A fleeting, ephemeral promise among the countless others that define childhood. Seated firmly on top of the piles, the two men begin to push once more. He's small enough that he can sit tightly behind the rim on the top of the cart as it jostles through increasingly rural countryside, so he simply enjoys the vibrations of the ride as they flow through his body. The wind begins to pick up, and Yoshihide becomes acutely aware that the cart is now quite high upon a hill, even further than before. Turning, Yoshihide sees the men are not quite struggling, but they're huffing and breathing quite deep as the cart gains more altitude. He worries that he's adding too much weight, but his fear is quickly abated as the slope of the hill curves closer toward a flat plain. Slowly, the cart levels and stops. The men take a breather. From up here, high upon the highest hill Yoshihide's ever seen in his life, he can gaze upon all of the trees and houses and roads and people from far, far away. His eyes are wider than the wheels of his royal carriage, and his mouth stands agape at the sight. Keen Volander overtakes him. After but a few minutes of this ephemeral moment, the cart jostles slightly. Yoshihide spots the first man's hand gripping the edge of the cart. He's smiling now, widely, as he begins to speak, telling the boy that he'll want to hold on tight for this next part. It takes a few seconds for the young boy to register what he means, before the cart begins to lull forward on the track. The realization slams into him, and he grips onto the side of the cart just before it begins to roll down the hill, slowly at first, then faster, then faster. He wants to yell, but the fear arrests any scream in his throat. The minecart barrels and barrels and barrels, faster and faster and faster, until at breakneck speeds, it slams down, severing the finger in one clean motion. The man screams. Although the wound is cauterized instantly, although the doctor's entire arm has been numbed with anesthetics, he still screams. Yoshihide knows better than to ask him, though he still wonders why. It is, after all, to ultimately save his life. As the man clutches his hand in mental anguish, Yoshihide studies the severed digit. Wrapped tight around the joint is the silvery strand of silk digging into the now lifeless flesh of the finger. He flexes it in his hand, feeling how it bends in his palm, rubbing the cauterized portion in curiosity. It's still warm to the touch. He shakes his head, then gets to work. It takes several attempts, but after consistent pressure in precise places, the string begins to come loose and soon slides off. He discards the finger. At least half of his assumption is correct. He begins work on the other. Yoshihide stretches the thread out, stringing it through the finger guillotine his team hastily assembled for this particular project. He does not hesitate as he turns it on, sending it careening down onto the thin white strand. It clunks against the metal, then lifts. The string remains undamaged. The blade is chipped. Yoshihide's assumptions are correct, at least for the next 3 days. He turns and studies the man, still clutching his hand in psychosomatic shock. He's crying now, sitting upright, curled on the floor, hyperventilating. Director Yoshihide briskly walks towards him, crouches down and establishes eye contact, asking the man his name. It takes the man several moments to process the absurdity of the question, before snapping back into reality, hesitantly replying that he is Dr. Zenshi Naigu. Yoshihide asks to see the doctor's hand, and he hesitantly reaches out. Yoshihide examines the hand idly, as though this was all normal. He spends several seconds before he spots it. On the ring finger, a thin silver strand beginning to swirl, digging into the flesh. Interesting. Yoshihide looks back up at the man. He apologizes to him, telling him that it seems as though the procedure was a failure. He recommends he gets his affairs in order within the next 24 hours. He doesn't take any time to witness the doctor's reaction, but he can take a guess at what he's feeling. Shock. Horror. The realization that one doesn't even have time left. But it doesn't bother the director to break the news. He'd had to do it countless times, after all. The administrator's voice rings in his ear. Are you prepared to do the work? He shivers. As he exits the chamber, he nabs the now separated thread and walks into the observation deck. An assistant stands at attention. He doesn't need to say a word as he hands the string off, the associate understanding precisely what to do. They turn and walk away towards the door, and push it open just as another person pushes past them inside. Not just any person, of course. His daughter. He hasn't seen her in weeks. He'd been too busy. She strides in, not informally, but not as clinically as he taught her. There's an air of softness to her walk that he half thinks to rebuke her for, but he swallows his complaint in his throat. She shouldn't be here. She greets him casually, and he tells her that she shouldn't be here. It's intended to be a statement of fact. Instead, it's more of a reassurance. But I don't mind your company. He curses himself for betraying his love for her, then curses himself for cursing himself. She says that she knows, with a somber tone in her voice. She continues, but a scream finishes her sentence for her, reverberating through the chamber. She yelps at the sound. Yoshihide already knows where it's coming from. Naigu. The shock must have worn off. He turns to him. He's screaming from despair, clutching his hand, but then snaps back around to Yuzuki. She's looking at him with an inscrutable expression, one that he imagines he sports often himself, one that certainly did not befit her mother. It takes her several seconds to find the words, but they arrive eventually on their own. She asks if he did this, and although he doesn't know how to respond, he responds anyway, saying that he did. The expression turns dour as she asks why. He replies that it was necessary, and he clicks his tongue, weighing the scale of love and secrecy in his heart. They were not, he finds, competing. He states that he cannot tell her why, and apologizes. His daughter pauses. There's a brief tension in the air, and Yoshihide realizes with growing trepidation that he was being tested, a test that has already been thoroughly failed. The scorn on her face is palpable, and cuts through his heart like a dagger. She hesitates for several seconds. Their minds are in sync, and she knows what he knows, neurons exchanging signals with no medium in between. Then, without saying a word, Yuzuki turns and walks away, not even as much as throwing a furtive glance in his direction. The doorknob morphs under her touch as she pulls, then slams the door behind her. He puts aside everything, and for a brief fraction of a moment, the kayfabe is broken. Yoshihide wants nothing more than to leave this accursed place, to cherish the only family he has left, to live out his remaining days doing anything but this. But, as he reaches for the door, his eyes treacherously drift. He sees Naigu, sobbing now, hunched in a corner, contemplating his fate in the fourth stage of grief. His eye is caught, though, by the scarlet-red stain streaked across the guillotine's bottom plate, a trail of blood that could not have been caused by a cauterized wound. The facade returns, and the Foundation's tendrils once again take root in his mind. He can apologize to her later. For now, he approaches Dr. Zenchi, who looks ahead with hollow eyes. Yoshihide once again crouches, then speaks, asking the doctor what his blood type is. The man doesn't respond for a beat. Then focus returns to his face, and his gaze tilts until it upturns sharply, slowing at the end of a perfect curve. Yoshihide is shivering, utterly terrified. The sounds of the forest, originally awe-inspiring, now reverberated in an alien echo as he came to the realization that these men did not know him, and he did not know them. They were strangers, and although he had seen them push the cart every day along the track, he never knew just how far they traveled, just how far their jobs made them go. The two approached the cart, smiling and laughing, apparently oblivious, Yoshihide hopes, to his reaction. He doesn't dare speak up or share his thoughts. His heart races in its place. Without asking, the men begin to push once more. He begins to worry about where they're taking him. What lies at the end of the track? How far are they going to go? Are they going to take him back? Is he going to be able to go back? Nothing but anxiety occupies Yoshihide's thoughts for the next 3 hours. The men talk between the two of them about trivial matters far above Yoshihide's concern, almost as though he didn't exist. Perhaps they've even forgotten he was there, as quiet as he is. It would not be the first time. After a long while, too long of a while, the men stop pushing the cart once more, wiping sweat from their brows and dusting dirt off their briefs. There's still an endless stretch of track leading off beyond the tree line, so the question of why they stopped remains in the air, until one of the men pulls out a wrapped sandwich from their pocket. He turns to Yoshihide, smiling, and notes that he didn't pack any lunch. Yoshihide shakes his head no. They both chuckle, and the man offers him some of his. They help him down from the piles of dirt, and he sits next to them as they begin to share jokes, smiling, laughing amongst themselves and with him. They're jovial, peaceful even. They appreciate his company, which begins to soothe Yoshihide's gnawing concerns, silencing them in one long, fell swoop. He begins giggling and telling his own jokes, and they laugh, and he doesn't know whether they're just humoring him or if they actually find him funny, but it matters not for the young boy. In due time, they finish their meals, each satisfied. With their strength rejuvenated, the men begin to stretch and get up, heaving and sighing as they prepare to continue their own work. Yoshihide, perhaps anachronistically, wonders if they know how important their work is, how important it will be. But he hops from the stone they were eating their lunch upon, and quickly runs up to the cart once more. The first man turns to him, smirking again, asking him if he's ready to keep pushing. Yoshihide beams, his spirit fully revived, and exclaims, "Yes." The man laughs again. He laughs a lot. Yoshihide once again takes position behind the cart. Now he's less concerned and more curious. Curious to see where the track ends. With the experience of pushing it once before, he steadies himself, preparing, and with a single, powerful shove, the director throws the door to his office open, thudding it against the back wall, reverberating through the room. The space is empty. He walks past the dusting bookshelves and the streaks of sunlight beaming down onto the floor, and circles the lone desk in the back center to get to his computer. With a click, it powers up, and he sits whilst tapping his hands in anticipation. When the screen eventually turns on, Yoshihide promptly navigates to the intranet communications, they all call it email anyway, and sees the notification he's been waiting days for. It's a direct line from the O5 Council, with several attachments, a good sign. He opens it, trembling, and soon his lips blossom into a smile. Finally, the Council has approved his request for a complete release of information pertaining to SCP-001's victims, based on his progress thus far. His eyes scan the list, and he is overjoyed to find a plethora of information. Every victim's names, ages, dates of birth, their employment information, record infractions, salaries, their familial ties, their deepest secrets, their greatest fears, a list of everything they've ever eaten from the moment they stepped foot into the Foundation's custody, a list of every time they've had sex and with whom, utterly, totally comprehensive in every regard. For most, this would be too much information. For Yoshihide, he's in his element. Immediately, he checks his first hunch. It doesn't take more than a few keystrokes before the list is being filtered by blood type. The director waits patiently for several seconds before the columns and rows neatly organize themselves. 73% of SCP-001 victims are Type B. It's not perfect, but it's vastly overrepresented in the data, to the point that, while it doesn't blow the case wide open, Yoshihide considers it a success. He glances at the bottom of the page, and is morbidly amused to see Dr. Zenshi among the list of the dead. Another statistic, but an invaluable one at that. Next, he checks the date of deaths. The entries order themselves at his command, and he plots them into a simple graph. Much to his surprise, it's not quite linear. It's speeding up, very slowly, but thoroughly. It's no surprise now that the administrator was so eager for Yoshihide to begin work as soon as possible, beyond the daily deaths anyways. The pencil taps against his chin. He checks the CRV levels. Their averages are lower, slightly. He checks position, site, and salaries. No patterns there. Cause of death doesn't vary at all, and he knew that already, but it's a hunch. But he checks the list for past incidents. Foundation averages around 40% for known major infractions to their code of conduct, and this list turns up at around 80%. That's another significant deviation, and begins to reinforce his theory. He quickly glances through them. Embezzlements frequent enough to be eyebrow-raising, but Yoshihide doesn't jump to conclusions. Very likely that the Foundation's just got a lot of it across the board. Some notable ones catch his eye, though. An attempted defector to the GOC. A woman using an inanimate anomaly against protocol. a man leaving his friend behind during a containment breach to save himself. They're connected by an underlined thread, which Yoshihide begins to see. An outline forms, and his hunch becomes slightly more than a hunch. His gaze drifts. On his desk, besides several scattered papers and manila folders, the silk from the severed finger floats in a glass container, slowly filling with blood. Type B blood specifically, with no genetic matches he can find. He pulls closer to it and watches it swirl slowly in a circle, bobbing up and down. Carefully, Yoshihide opens the transparent cylinder and plucks the string out. His fingertips stain red, and they shimmer as he holds the thread up to the light. Then his other hand grasps the bottom edge, pulling it taut, and then pulling it further than that, as hard as he can. Several moments pass before, eventually, he gently places it back in the pool of blood and seals it inside. He mutters to himself, reassuring, I suppose. After several seconds further, he turns and begins writing a requisition request for a member of the D-Class faculty, with an emphasis on particular behavior patterns and Type B blood. He'll have to wait at least a day for the department to get back to him. He sighs and leans back in his chair as he hits send, ignoring the overwhelming inferno of emails from countless people, some of which, to Yoshihide's dread, shares his name. He knows he should read them. He knows he should just talk to her. But he worries if he involves her at all, if he gets her into the sights of the man watching over his shoulder. In spite of the cloud in his head, Yoshihide pushes aside the thoughts and allows himself a moment of respite from the work, taking in the brown and gold furnishings of the site director's office. The peace feels fleeting, as though he were a sailor riding along a clear sky, with thunder and lightning sounding off in the horizon. Lingering dread thus interferes with his break. He turns off his computer, pushes himself off his chair, and walks towards the door. He grabs its handle, and with great force, the cart is off once more. For the next several hours, as Yoshihide alternates between sitting on and pushing the minecart, as they laugh and talk and sweat and just exist, the sun inches its way across the sky. The brilliant blue of the sky dwindles down into a murky mix of red, orange, and yellow beams. The twilight encroaches, and none of them seem to mind or care, caught up in the excitement of play and work. Until suddenly, the atmosphere shifts, and the cart comes to a slow, final stop. The men glance at each other, mid-conversation, a silent pact strung extending from between each other. A communication known only through context. Yoshihide asks them what's wrong, and they turn down to him with a gentle smile. The first man puts his hands on his knees and tells him that they're at the end of the track now. The boy blinks and glances behind the cart. Sure enough, there is no more track extending into the horizon. But there's nothing here. All that accompanies the trio is a large plot of uneven land, holes haphazardly filled in with dirt. He asks them if they fill in the holes, and the second man smiles. He explains that they do, as their job is to make sure this whole path is nice and well filled for a government project. But they've had to go a bit slower today, and their shift is coming to an end soon, so they'll probably continue filling it tomorrow. Yoshihide feels disappointed that there was nothing at the end of his arduous journey. Still, he beams, proud of his accomplishment, and asks if he can see them tomorrow. The first man replies that of course he can, but he needs to be getting back home, as it's getting late and they don't want his parents getting mad. He gasps. He forgot his parents don't know where he is. They're going to be mad if he comes home too late. The man points and continues, telling Yoshihide that if he keeps following the tracks, he'll get back to where he started. It's almost a perfectly straight line, so if he walks near it, he'll make it home safe and sound. Yoshihide steps forward a few waddling steps, then glances back. Behind the men, the sun beams outwards, surrounding the pair in a brilliant orange glow. Clouds streak across the sky, which now begin to turn a darkish blue. He wonders if, all these years later, they remember him still. He waves goodbye, and with no time to lose, Yoshihide turns and sees his daughter close his office door with a firm click. He didn't notice her come in. The office, now only illuminated by fluorescence in the dead of night, is littered with discarded papers and experimentation tools haphazardly strewn about. Yoshihide's head was cemented firmly down towards a final experiment proposal, halfway done with drafting, along with a document outlining a firm hypothesis for the mechanics behind SCP-001's A selection, and the feasibility of permanent containment. He was so absorbed, he had, apparently, missed her calling his name several times. They stare at each other now. They haven't spoken once since that day in the lab, that day when she turned and left without a word all those months ago. He notices she's holding a bag. He glances, but reaffixes his gaze to her face. She stares at him and says, "Father." The single word strikes him like a bullet. She's never called him father before, never with such a tone of trepidation, never with such a sadness in her voice. He responds weakly by speaking her name, and she winces. Of course she does. He steps out from his own body and can see himself for who he is to her, at this precarious moment. A maniac, desperate for promotion, willing to forsake everything for a chance at power. A man working himself to the bone to meet a deadline, telling himself it's for a greater cause. A man who doesn't even have time to answer an email from his daughter. He can see a perfect reflection of himself in her eyes, and he hates what he sees, what he's become to her. Yuzuki, his daughter, his only living family left, approaches his desk. The bag falls to the floor gently with a thump, and Yoshihide's curiosity rises again. But he doesn't say anything. He knows he's been given a final chance, given one last test. This time, he knows it's coming. This time, he's prepared. This time, he does not plan to cut the thread. She sighs and folds her arms into her lap. They stare at each other once more, the connection from the lab briefly reestablished, the lightning rekindled, the synapses reconnecting. And then she begins. She states that he's changed, and Yoshihide looks down at her folded hands, pretending to find the right words to express how he feels. He swallows the gut feeling slamming at his chest, the ego he has built around himself, and his work flowing down into his stomach. He looks back up, sadly, and agrees that he has. There's another crackle of electricity between them, and this time it ignites something, only an ember. She states that he's lost himself to his work. He swallows his dread and agrees. She says that he's lost all his faith in the world. He swallows his discontentment and agrees. She shudders, inhaling sharply, and says that he's almost lost her. He swallows his pride and says, "Not yet." Yuzuki closes her eyes, exhaling slightly, and says no, he hasn't lost her, yet. He lets the words hang momentarily. She doesn't know the truth, but she's very close to it regardless. She was always smart like that. Yoshihide sighs. The preamble has now concluded, the first hurdle passed. There's a tension that's softened and yet hardened simultaneously. The fear of dismissal has been overcome, a Sisyphean peak rolled over. She knows he's still in there somewhere. All that remains now is a father and a daughter, ready to present their souls bare to one another, grievances aired thoroughly, without fear of tacit rejection. Both of them now prepared to deal with the hard part. Yuzuki continues, saying that he's still locking himself in here, away from the world. He's still dedicated to his work above everything else, above his friends and family, above himself, above her. She begins to say that he's changed, but she doesn't want to say it again, because she's now realizing that he hasn't really changed. The symptoms were always present, just magnified now. She struggles to find the right words to express what she sees, what she thinks of him. Yoshihide finishes for her and says that he's become a husk. She looks up at him suddenly again, her eyes wide. The eyes of her mother, the fires ignited deep down. He agrees with her that he has lost himself to his work, and he's poured all of himself into a blood-filled vessel. He gestures briefly at the twine floating in a nearly filled container of blood on his desk. He says that he knows he's utterly destroyed his soul and his body for this job, but it's all been for her. Everything he's done has been for her. There isn't a day that has gone by where he's not thinking of her. She tenses and says, but he blinks and says there's no further buts. Yoshihide flinches before his daughter's hands even hit the table. Tears leak out against her will. She yells that he's refused to even speak with her. He's refused to take any time out of his schedule to show his daughter he loves her. He's suffocated her whole life, ever since Mom died, and then he disappeared as soon as he found a game to play on a grander scale. He sinks on every level, his shoulders scrunching in response. Her grievances run deep, and he realizes, only now realizes that... She draws back her hands and sinks into her own chair. She didn't mean to go that far. She whispers that he's abandoned her. He doesn't know what to say. She's right, he realizes, and from her perspective, her grief is wholly valid. He is an antagonist in her story, even if he knows it was for a good cause, for her. Yoshihide looks up at her hard features, remembering all the times he fought with her mother in that instance, then turns his head down in shame. He's tearing up too now. He says that she's right, and he's so sorry. It was never his intention to hurt her. Not now, not ever. At some point he lost track of what hurdle of the test he was on, as the feelings overtook him. He suspects she lost track too. But a change in the way they breathe tells him that whatever hurdle they were now on has just passed, and the test is approaching its final crescendo. She takes a second to calm herself, collecting the tears back into her eyes, then continues. She tells him that she needs him to prove that to her. He knows what's coming. He swallows his anxiety. She says that she's not stupid, and she knows that whatever it is he's containing has to be contained. It's a dangerous, probably powerful artifact of some kind. She won't ask him to stop his work. She won't even ask what it is. But she needs him to promise her that at the very least, it won't come at the cost of everything else. That he'll put time aside for her, and for his friends, and for himself. Yuzuki pauses again, allowing the reality to soak in, the final veil of emotional filtration lifting from their faces. Fear is palpable on hers. She tells him that she's worried about him, and she loves him. The phrase feels artificial, but he knows the sentiment is still genuine. To love is to be loved. To change is to be changed. His wife had once told him that. He had not forgotten. Yoshihide folds his hands into his lap and bites his lip. She is not asking for much. He doesn't even have to abandon the work, have to abandon his crowning achievement in order to placate her. And he is not an unreasonable man, and she knows this, and he knows she knows this. There is no reason for him to deny her this single consolidation, this singular reassurance. He realizes he is staring down at the experiment paper. He sees what he's written, and then he resolves himself to love his daughter above all else. The fire now flows through his veins, his hands ball into gentle fists, and he can feel his face flush with life once more. He doesn't need to be a slave to his work. He can resolve himself, force himself if necessary, to put aside the aesthetics of functionality and purposefulness to become a human being again, of flesh and blood, to see the beauty and mundanity once more. He turns up to tell her he loves her. He stops. His blood, mere seconds prior burning hot, now runs ice cold. His face pales, and he begins to sweat. Yuzuki blinks at him, then realizes he's not looking at her. She turns, heart pulsing in her chest, and comes face to face with the administrator, who greets Yuzuki and says that he doesn't believe they've had the pleasure of meeting. Any warmth left in the room dissipates instantly. The administrator stands in the doorway of the office, smiling vacantly at the pair in front of him with his hands crossed over one another. Yoshihide immediately stands on his feet, and Yuzuki glances back at him briefly before returning her eyes to the stranger, telling him that they haven't. No one moves. The man smiles and states that he is the administrator of the SCP Foundation. The authority vested in him is quite grand, as he speaks with the authority of the O5 Council. To put it bluntly, he is the one whom her father directly answers to. She doesn't know how to respond. Truthfully, Yoshihide doesn't know either. But he can't let him interfere. The situation is too precarious, and he knows several critical wires are crossed. Yoshihide glares at the administrator, then clears his throat, telling him that they are in the middle of something important, and asks if this can wait. The administrator smiles and says that it most certainly cannot, considering it is pertinent to the situation at hand. He has full knowledge of what happens within these walls, and sometimes he can have some knowledge of what will happen. He turns to Yuzuki, who flinches under his malicious gaze, and then he takes a step forward, and then another, slowly. His gaze is affixed to her, and her breathing quickens as he approaches meticulously, as though stepping through a minefield. Somehow, through this impossible wait, Yuzuki asks him if he's the one keeping her father here and tying him down. The administrator smiles again. He's doing that a lot, to Yoshihide's terror, but does not slow his achingly slow march. He states that he is, as her father is in charge of the containment of SCP-001, the most important anomaly their organization needs to contain. She must understand then why he has no time for her. Her expression morphs into a mix of fear and fury, and she tells him that it's quite rude to listen in on other people's conversations. The administrator chuckles and says that her father is the most important man in the Foundation aside from himself. He is well on his way to becoming an O5 Council member, as there's a vacant seat, and he's keen on getting skilled people into places where they're needed. He is only met with silence and panicked breathing, so the administrator continues. He states that communications monitoring is sometimes necessary, as there are occasional rogue elements that require amendment. Yuzuki steps back. Yoshihide sees a shimmer in the air as the administrator reaches out his hand towards her, almost as if to grab and rip her apart with sheer will. His face is resolute. Yoshihide's eyes go wide, wider than he's ever stretched them. He knows what she's about to do. He shouts at her before the world rips into several threads, separating the true from the false from the true in a stunning, red-hot wave of plasmatic distortion to reality, blooming out in several layers from her in all directions. Everything flies everywhere, and the unreal becomes real, cracks shattering and tearing and morphing, and then everything snaps back into place, entropy reversing sickeningly fast, like an omelet reverting back into an egg in a blink, and Yuzuki is thrown onto the desk with a deafeningly loud crash. The blood-filled container knocks onto the floor and shatters, drenching Yoshihide in blood type B. She screams in pain, a horrific howl that hurts his very soul to hear. The administrator stands motionless, watching her with no expression, his hand now tucked by his side. It all happens in a single moment, before Yoshihide can process everything that occurred. Reality crashes down in an instant, and he pulls to run towards his daughter, before being yanked back by someone who most certainly was not behind him a second ago. He realizes with horror that his hands are quite literally tied. He looks up. The administrator is staring down at Yuzuki as several guards flood the room, stepping around the now burning papers and melted appliances. She turns around weakly and locks eyes with the man whose untorn reality. Her face is filled with pure terror, his with passive indifference. Yoshihide recognizes that the guards have brought with them a Scranton reality anchor, but it couldn't have been here a second ago. The administrator sighs and tells Yoshihide that all anomalies must be contained, as he told him before. Yoshihide snarls at him and calls him a bastard, saying that this isn't what he agreed to. If he heard him, the administrator didn't seem to react. He turns to the guards binding Yoshihide's daughter and tells them to take her to a retrofitted containment cell in Site-01. She'll do for Rashomon. She groans and sobs in violent fits as they restrain her. Yoshihide spouts endless curses and obscenities as they finish, and as they yank her back out towards the door, her panic focuses and her vision narrows back onto the single anchor in her life. The administrator watches her with passing interest. She sobs, and he winces as she calls out for him. Yoshihide struggles wildly now, desperately, futilely. It's no use. He can't reach her. He can't touch her anymore. And then, with one last click of the door, she's gone. Silence deafens the room. He crumples onto the floor. Several more empty, aching moments pass with the administrator turned towards the door. Then the knots around Yoshihide's arms come undone in a practiced motion, and the last guard wordlessly salutes and walks out through the door. Now, only he and the administrator, arms behind his back, remain. There's a hoarse, bitter laugh. Yoshihide wonders if he has gone insane with grief, but he realizes quickly that he's not the one laughing. The administrator turns and smiles warmly. He says that he apologizes for the dramatics, but he must understand that sacrifice is necessary for containment sometimes. Yoshihide spits at the man, and his saliva lands squarely on the administrator's heels. He doesn't react, but he continues, saying that it occurred to him in that moment, as he screamed for his daughter's return, as he made a fool for himself, that the two of them have quite a differing perspective on what it means to contain something. Yoshihide doesn't grace the thing in front of him with a response any longer. He continues regardless. He has already told him his perspective, that containment is for the purposes of keeping the beasts along the path, to maintain normalcy, to ensure the creatures in the dark no longer go bump in the night, to prevent the child from being maimed again, whether by animal or man. A worthy, selfless cause. The administrator tilts his head and smiles again, saying that Yoshihide sees things differently. Containment isn't a means to an end. It is an end in of itself. A work of art. A portrait. He tosses the idea in his head, almost jovially. Yoshihide is an artist, and SCP-001 is his masterpiece. It's both pitiful, but also mesmerizing, a perspective he's never seen before. No wonder he is unique among his peers, and he truly looks forward to the final act of his performance. Yoshihide swallows, the dread open on his face like a book. They both do not say anything for several seconds, an opaque wall raised between their minds and intentions. And then, suddenly, the administrator turns and walks briskly towards the door. He stops before opening it, turning his head back. He states that, as an O5 council member, he has the ability to exempt anomalies from containment if he believes them to be beneficial to their mission. Necessary sacrifices. There is only one path for him to reach that position. Yoshihide swallows everything and says that he understands. The administrator smiles and says, "Very good. Perhaps this story shall have a happy ending." And then he is gone, just as before. Nothing remains round the colossal wreck. The office is an inferno, but Yoshihide doesn't complain. He takes stock of his surroundings. Everything's either burnt or melted or coated in ash. His papers, if they are still intact, are thrown everywhere in a chaotic pattern. The glass containing the thread is shattered, and the blood has seeped into his clothes and onto the floor. He spots the spider silk and gingerly places it within his coat pocket. He doesn't expect to wash up anytime soon anyways. His desktop is utterly destroyed. He'll have to request a new one. No, most likely the administrator is already preparing him one. They could easily finish the job themselves, but Yoshihide knows that he is the one that's going to complete the work. That's all he can do now. Downwards, Yoshihide's eyes drift. If he had any more room for shock today, it would be well spent on his daughter's bag, still seated next to the chair she was sitting in moments ago. His hands tremble, not from fear, but from weakness. He reaches down and lifts the bag from the floor, seating it down on the chair with a gnawing feeling of trepidation. The folds are cast aside, and he reaches in, pulling the singular object from its hidden wrapper and out into the open in a single swift motion. In his hands, Yuzuki's toy monkey sits, melted from reality warping nearly beyond recognition. She was going to give it back to him. Yoshihide, dizzying, turns and breaks out into a panicked sprint. The sky slowly turns darker and darker as the sun sets over the horizon, its ferocious flames quelled by the oncoming night. Yoshihide shivers as the air around him begins to cool, his light clothes, designed for the hot weather, doing nothing to protect him from the elements. Wind slips on the breeze past him, and he shuts his eyes, trembling as he runs. It's been a long time since he's been alone like this, by himself. He's never had to navigate in a city at night on his own, let alone a forest. Still, the tracks of the minecart feel familiar beneath his feet, and he doesn't feel desperate, even if he's scared. He knows, eventually, the tracks will lead him home, and this will be nothing more than a daydream, a bad memory. Déjà vu. As he runs, the twilight turns to dusk, and the dusk to evening. It becomes totally dark. Even while following the narrow trail, the trek feels impossibly long, and he worries he might be going the wrong way. A totally illogical feeling, he knows, but it doesn't stop him from feeling it. The worry aches in his chest as a child. He trips. The stumble catches himself off guard, his balance thrown entirely off. Tears well in his eyes, and no one is around to wipe them away. He does so, and becomes acutely aware of a burning in his knee, a scratch that feels deeper than it should have been from a simple fall. He feels it through his clothes and winces. His fingertips are wet. This isn't how the daydream is supposed to go. He gets up now, the bile in his throat rising with him. Yoshihide sprints before he even recognizes that he needs to run. There's something wrong. He runs, and runs, and runs, and eventually something scratches at him again, ripping a tear through his arm. He yells, clutching it, but keeps running, eyes tight shut. He knows he should open them, but it's too dark, and the horror of the unknown is simply too intense. He keeps running, and another stab pierces his skin, this time directly on his torso. And then another. They're not too deep, but he's bleeding, and he can feel his mud-caked pants mix red. Eventually, whatever is tormenting him causes him to trip once more, sending him slamming into the dirt and rail. His eyes open by force. The moon is out now, and shines a white glow onto the world. Now he can see the path ahead of him. He screams. Before him, around the rail, long, thin swords jut out from the trees and the earth. They shine impeccably, as though they've never seen a day of use in their life. All of them, whether above or below, point directly towards the rail, forming a tunnel of knives, blades, and pure sharp. There's just barely enough room for him to squeeze through. He has to get home. He has to get home. Yoshihide takes several deep, shuddering breaths, and with trembling trepidation, signals the experiment to start. The observation room is packed. Several bureaucrats, scientists, assistants, and guards are watching with keen anticipation. It's the experiment that will finally, if Yoshihide is to be believed, crack the SCP-001 case wide open. There's a buzz in the air, of excitement, of potentiality, of containment, of the penultimate crescendo in the art of the absurd. Yoshihide turns to his right. There, the administrator stands silently. He does not look back at Yoshihide, his eyes glazed and turned towards the D-class in the chamber. It does not seem as though he is particularly eager to see the experiment's conclusion, as though he knows already how it will end. It's possible that he does, which pisses Yoshihide off even more. To distract himself, he turns and speaks instructions into the chamber microphone. The room falls perfectly silent behind him, as though standing in single file behind a leader. Yoshihide tells D-023 to pick up the axe. The man in the orange jumpsuit behind the glass turns up at the microphone and scoffs, but does as he's told. The axe isn't particularly notable. It's standard, built by a mundane facility outside the Veil. No, it's not the axe which is important here. He tells the D-class to approach the artifact, stating that it's not hazardous. He does so. The string, bleeding from non-existent pores, is anchored in place with a powerful clamping mechanism. It's stretched taut, though this of course does not compromise its integrity. The D-class steps forward, his grip firmly on the axe, eyeing the twine with ignorant suspicion. It does not matter if he trusts the Foundation or not. He will do it regardless. He is not much different than I, Yoshihide muses bitterly. A grim truth and reality. He holds the man standing beside him in as much contempt as he does fear. He does not know what the administrator is capable of, nor does he know what his end is, beyond seeing Yoshihide and the O5 Council, though he doesn't know to what conclusion that outcome will lead to either. He leans forward now and reactivates the microphone. He tells the D-Class to repeatedly strike the string in front of him with the axe. It may require several attempts, but he should keep trying until the task is completed or he is ordered to stop. The D-Class shrugs and begins to fulfill his task. The first hit does nothing, though that was well expected. The man was known by Yenko in his former life. He was a collector of fine arts, a member of an elite circle of art critics with a taste for the anomalous. When he would see a piece he truly admired, he would stop at nothing to obtain it for his private collection, which of course inevitably led him to the extreme when he met someone who simply would not give it up. Not even the endless hordes of his wealth could save him from prison in the end. His own brothers and sisters of the guild turned on him and threw him away to rot, where he was inevitably scouted. His life was defined by his own whims, a life of decadence, a life of greed, a life, most importantly, of selfishness. And that's the crux of it. Yoshihide sighs as the second strike hits. Selfishness. A heart that is destined to only look inwards, a view that never extends beyond one's own wants. It was obvious to him as soon as blood came into the equation. Personality types based on blood were pseudoscience, but anomalies never operated on scientific principles to begin with. It was just a matter of confirming his theory. He turns rightward as the third strike hits. The string reverberates strangely, and the crowd murmurs as they watch. Yoshihide wonders if the figure standing beside him would qualify as a selfish man. Is the administrator truly acting selflessly? Or was this all brought upon by his self-absorption? What did he want that would necessitate all this grooming? Yoshihide was going to complete the work regardless, no? As though noticing him for the first time, the administrator turns in a manner that one could describe as somber. He doesn't say anything for several beats, long enough that the fourth strike occurs, but then he sighs himself and says that the D-Class always was a selfish man. Yoshihide turns back to the D-Class and says that he is aware. The administrator chuckles as though he's on the other end of some inside joke. He turns back towards the string and says that he supposes he is. Seething, endless rage once again bubbles in his chest. He remembers Yuzuki's face as she screamed, dragged from his office in agonizing pain. He remembers the mountain of smiling bodies, groaning and shifting, decaying in an abandoned pile. He remembers his wife, bleeding out on the pavement. And as the axe strikes the string a fifth time, he imagines the administrator's neck in its place. The man in the chamber continues to strike it, a sixth, seventh, eighth time. The string, while reverberating, loses none of its consistency. Murmurs arise behind him, but neither Yoshihide nor the administrator turn. The tension is palpable, both literal and metaphorical. A ninth, a tenth, and an 11th. Was Yoshihide wrong? The doubt creeps through everyone but the pair, and soon the D-Class is flexing for another blow. Frustration builds on his face, and with one final motion, one final guttural, definitive, inevitable swing, Yoshihide bleeds. He is cut in several dozen places, red wounds filling with pus and searing pain, warming his flesh against the freezing cold of the night. The swords surround him now, too tightly packed to be avoided as he runs through the tunnel they form around his frail body. He sobs, bitterly, weeping through the pain, but continuing to move, desperate to get home, desperate for the safety of familiarity. One thought repeats through his mind, over and over as he flees, dominating his consciousness and drowning out all else. I don't want to die. At last, through the pale reflections of the moonlight, he sees it up ahead. A light, a shining, shimmering light, an end to the tunnel, an end to the torture. He pushes, receiving several more cuts and spilling several more drops of blood. It doesn't matter. As long as he makes it, as long as he makes it to the village, he'll finally be safe, finally be home. He bursts through the final aperture and is greeted by a raging inferno, an endless hell. The construction site is gone. All that remains in his view is houses, burning, rotting into ash and soot and dust. Black clouds pour into the sky in bulky columns, and the entire horizon glows around him. The breeze is replaced by radiated heat, and Yoshihide cowers under the intensity of the flames, under the intensity of the shining light. In spite of this horrific sight, he presses on, pushing through the tearing and burning sensations that his body screams at him to address. He knows what he must do to make the nightmare end. He needs to find his house. He needs to go home. He needs to find them. He needs to know. He spots it then, in the center of the inferno, surrounded by the flames of the others. It seems untouched, but no. He realizes the fire has already long since burned the home, its walls now ashen gray, its wood now riddled with holes. He is far, far too late. Yoshihide steps, trembling, both from fear and exhaustion, into the house. Its doors open without so much as even a push, as though welcoming him back. Nothing greets him at first, besides the smoldering pale coating the walls. He tries to call out, but all that escapes his throat is a gurgle. He hopes that's not too bad a sign. Slowly he climbs the staircase across the front door. It goes up, and one bit at a time, Yoshihide meets its steps, gripping the rail for dear life. It takes several minutes for the boy to finish climbing, but when he does, he collapses, panting and exhausted at the second floor's landing. When he does push himself to his feet, it's met with a squelch, as blood, type B blood, pools around his feet. He looks up. The master bedroom door looms ominously, towering above his short stature. Foreboding, it mocks him, challenging him to confront what lies inside, challenging him to face the music. He cannot afford to delay the inevitable. Yoshihide opens the door. In the king bed, two corpses intertwine, holding tightly onto one another. Their flesh is burnt off, their blood has long boiled, their hair has been plucked clean from their heads, and their hollow eye sockets stare petrified, longingly, achingly towards one another. The clothes they both wore have ceased to exist under the now gone hellfire, but it takes no effort for Yoshihide to identify them. He expected this, on some level. He expected no happy ending. His gaze rises like a flame. Above, hanging above the bed, a portrait of a man is framed in immaculately pristine condition. His skin mirrors the ash, a sickly mix between bone white and midnight black. The folds of his face wrinkle like a labyrinth, and his teeth shimmer pure. His gaze is affixed with gray eyes down towards Yoshihide, piercing him. And then it laughs. The sound fills the room, echoing through the roar of the flames and drowning out every other sensation. Yoshihide covers his ears and screams, if nothing but to drown out the noise. It does not stop, and in desperation he crawls. He crawls to the bed, then climbs, with limbs no longer belonging to an 8-year-old child, with forearms far too long and legs aged decades, and grabs the painting with his porous fingernails by the frame. In agony, he rips. The seams split and shred under his grasp as he sobs and screams and shakes, racked with despair and fear and hatred and overwhelming sadness, encompassing his whole body, his very soul. The world dissipates into the flames, engulfing the house once more, fire burning fuel well spent. Everything is alight once more, and the man continues to laugh and laugh and laugh, and Yoshihide abandons every ideal, every ounce of decorum he had left as he rips and maims his face to pieces. The tearing becomes manic and methodical concurrently. There's nothing left besides the searing heat and the face and the blood. The endless blood, the endless strings, and the endless pain. He digs his fingernails deeper in, but the man doesn't even mind, as though the flesh he inhabited was ephemeral, as though he was never there at all. The painting is in tatters now, but the laughter continues. There is one final stitch in the canvas, the jugular, strung tightly against the back wall. It bleeds, scarlet flowing in viscous, endless streams. The fires burn everything besides it, and through the frenzy, Yoshihide pulls. He pulls and pulls and pulls, staining his melting hands crimson, and pulls. He pulls until the very fabric of his body becomes undone, and he screeches a primal, final wail as he pulls and 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 pulls until the thread snaps. That just leaves us with Act 3, The Road to Hell. The water is soft, lapping against the sand. It drags at it, throwing clumps of spray up and back again. The black of the sky shines down, and 053, in the cold light of his headlamps, stares at the edge of visibility, of all things seen and unseen. He is sitting on a sand dune, waiting. He sips at his beer, his eyes clouding gradually as the evening stretches on and on. He wonders what's on the other side of the sea. He pictures a daytime scene, a beach hut, children building sandcastles, a pier stretching out into the waves. He picks up a handful of sand and lets it trickle through his fingers. He sighs and then starts as a shadow peers over him. "It's time," says the administrator. 053 creaks to his feet, willing his limbs to move. He takes a final look back across the water. Where does his sight end? How far across can he see? He isn't sure. The sea and the sky blend together. If a man drowned out there, nobody would witness his death, would ever be able to picture the desperation as he clung to life, flinging himself up out of the waves until he was sucked down beneath. He thinks about that, about moments erased from time. But this isn't the hour for that. The administrator is waiting beside the car, and 053 trudges towards him, slouching forward to his doom. The car is cold, and 053 feels himself shivering. He turns on the radio, low. Shostakovich twists from the speakers, pricking the goosebumps on his arms still higher. The administrator is staring out of the window, looking through the trees. The forest is dense here, whispering needles through the wind. 053 just stares straight ahead, watching as the road cuts through two emerging hillocks, flashing light dancing between them. He asks if the man lives in Rostwick, and the administrator blinks, turning at the question. He responds with a yes, before turning away again, his chin on his hand. 053 doesn't remember the last time he had a full night's sleep. The hours just tick by him, scratching at his mind, urging him onwards. When he was still Yoshihide, he was careful to be well rested. His work came first, and he had to ensure that his duty was done properly. The work was bigger than he was, and he couldn't let it down with his own poor choices. But now, he has a broader view of the matter. The work flows from him and through him. Burning his way through the night, working to the point of exhaustion, simply alters his state of consciousness. As long as his intent is pure, it continues. The ideas, the methods, are simply different. The administrator does not understand that, of course. He watches as the other man sighs, sitting back in his seat. The administrator asks if he ever told him what his father thought of hell. 053 doesn't turn, as he responds that he thought hell was dying. The administrator says that he did. His mother disagreed, of course. She thought hell was the living, waking world. She once painted a mural on their kitchen wall. It was a strange thing, one he held a great deal of affection for. The wonderful thing about driving is that 053 can concentrate on that instead of this. He has lost so much, shed so much, that it's a wonder the administrator's words still have the effect they do. Maybe it's the pile of bodies, or Yuzuki's face as she was dragged away, but each one feels like a cold, sharp nothing. The administrator continues, saying that she wasn't a well woman. Nervous spells, paranoid delusions. Looking at that mural, he felt he understood her better. It made her outbursts make sense. A memory flies by 053, and he replies that he thought his mother died before he knew her. The grin, like a flash, a blinding streak on his periphery. The administrator compliments him on his memory and says that he never really knew her, but he could see the effect she had on his family. Maybe he wanted to understand that, to reach through to her. Maybe he could heal the family. 053 asks if he did, and he curses himself for it slipping out, but the administrator doesn't seem angry. He just turns those eyes, those dark, shaded glasses onto him, and remarks that he should be watching the road. They continue on, in silence, watching as the moon falls down across the sky, spreading black ink among the stars. The cabin is sitting in the woods, waiting for them. A single light shines from behind glass as the pair of them trudge towards the door. The ground is wet, a thick mud that squelches up to their ankles. Their flashlights scrabble for the path, but they can't find it. The cabin is a small log affair. It's not well maintained. The timbers look like they're starting to rot. 053 raps on the door, attentive, alert. An owl hoots dimly, far in the distance, as the reeds wave in the gloom. A chair scrapes inside. There are footsteps, the sound of a metal cane tapping on the floor. The administrator starts to whistle, staring up at the moon. The door opens to a middle-aged man in his early 40s. He is rake-thin, his face bristling with a light, wiry stubble. He looks at them both, blinking against the cold, and then sighs before inviting them in. 053 shares a look with the administrator, and they step into a warm, cramped space. A thin wire bed dominates the far wall, and a wooden desk and table stand in front of them. Papers and a pen are strewn across the desk. The stranger sits down, looks them up and down, and gestures to the bed. The pair of them sit on it, side by side, awkwardly tucking their knees in. 053 feels like a child again, like an absurdity. A warm bulb hums gently above them. A fly bounces off of it, whining. The stranger takes out a box of cigarettes. They both decline, so he shrugs and lights himself up, still staring at them. He remarks that he thought they'd never find him, and the administrator admits that he was quite difficult to track down. 053 glances over. The administrator speaks carefully, with intent, as he scans the stranger's face. He says that he knew he would see him again, as he never forgets. The stranger smiles, puffing smoke into the air, and asks if he now wants to lock him up then. 053 shifts and leans forward, and says, perhaps. They have a job they want him to do, and if he does it for them, they'll leave him alone. The administrator is staring upwards and says nothing. 053 coughs and continues. There's an anomaly, a dangerous one that has plagued them for years and which has taken countless lives. He could be a great help. The stranger snorts and asks if he's got him on SCP-001. 053 pauses. He looks at the administrator, who is still looking up, ignoring him. He says that he didn't realize the man had been briefed. The man replies that he hasn't. He just remembers the last one. This isn't the first anomaly to take that slot. 053 turns back, sharply, and the administrator nudges him, pointing upwards. 053 looks up and gasps. The smoke from the cigarette is coating the ceiling, billowing around its edges. A picture is forming through the haze and the gloom. A smoke-filled dragon, its wings flapping towards an open sky, there and not there all at once. The man says that that was his, what the administrator wanted him to deal with. He had another fellow too, just like 053. 059, he thinks. He asks what happened to him, and 053 says that his colleague is fine, but he's still staring up at the image, watching it twist into and out of itself. The stranger glances at him, smiling, and remarks that it's pretty. The trick was to send it back to its own non-reality. It was a lie, and to a lie it returned. He sticks out a gangly hand, and 053 takes it, gingerly. The stranger tilts his head and introduces himself as Chokoto Shujin, Weaver of Miracles. He doesn't know what we're going to do to him, he thinks, as clear as day inside his mind. The administrator murmurs that he's a Type Q reality bender, and 053 watches as his boss stands up, still staring at the ceiling, admiring the waveforms. Shujin says to call him whatever he likes. It's all the same to him. He curls up in his chair, holding the cigarette away from him. His eyes are beetle black, fixated on 053's gaunt, aging face. The overseer instinctively reaches up to the back of his head, willing his dead hair to return. The administrator snaps back to the world and states that it's a simple offer. Return with them now, help them out, and they'll leave him alone. For good this time. Stay, and they'll send a team after him. 053 explains that Type Qs are in short supply, and he's determined that it's their best bet. They need to undermine the anomaly's moral sense. Shujin understands, as it was the same back in the day. This isn't about physics, it's about narrative, and the lessons taught and learnt. The problem with the anomaly he dealt with was the lies he told, and he drew the foolish to him. It was an easy one. This one, however, deals with the selfish, those who only think of themselves, their own petty concerns. It's a vague criteria, and it's through hundreds now. Shujin's eyes don't move. There's a warmth to them, a crackling fire behind them, pinning him to the wall. He remarks that it's fascinating, and it's no wonder he's scared. He then stands up and starts putting a handful of scattered items, papers, a book, a toothbrush, into a canvas bag, haphazardly and randomly. 053 blinks and rouses himself, asking if he'll come with them then. The administrator replies that of course he will, and he heads to the door, opening it wide. The cold air rushes in, and the light bulb flickers. He says that they don't have all night, and Shujin looks at him, shrugging. He shoulders his bag, and the three of them step out into the dark. Site-01 isn't too far away. 053 wondered about that before, about why a reality bender would hide under the noses of the Foundation's highest offices. But now he feels that he knows. There's a quiet confidence in Shujin's tone, his manner of speech, the way he moves through space. He knew they'd come for him eventually. What was the point in delaying the inevitable? The pitch tar of evening still surrounds them, an evening that stretches into the small hours, retaining the same sense of time, of anticipation. The administrator has called ahead, making sure the arrangements are made. They've been planning this for months, ever since 053 first hit on the idea. He feels himself there again, one late night in his office, watching the ceiling refracted through the ochre tint of whiskey, the lines spiraling out of his control. The administrator is sleeping now, dozing off in the back seat. Shujin stares straight ahead of him, tapping in time to the music from the radio. Schoenberg, late Schoenberg, screeching out dissonances into the flashes of cat's eye light on the road. 053 clears his throat and asks if he was always like this. Shujin smirks and says yes. The administrator is a cold, predatory lizard. He's surprised he came out here with 053, as you'd think he'd have better things to do. 053 nods and says that every time he's on the edge of something, about to finish something, there he is, hovering at his elbow, reminding him of this, SCP-001. He wants it to be him that does it, and he doesn't know why. Shujin remarks that maybe he thinks he's well suited for the job, but 053 just snorts. At first, sure. He caught quite the lucky break to start with. Made a huge breakthrough, got everyone's attention. Since then, though, he doesn't know. Other projects, other containments, he can get done. Not this, though. It's always eluded him. Everything he tries just fails. Shujin nods and says that SCP-001 is a tough one, and always was, for all of them. 053 asks what he means, but Shujin doesn't answer. The trees rear up, flashing beside his face, leering through the window. They lapse into silence for a while, before the strange man speaks again. He asks if he knows how many there have been. Iterations of 001. There's a snore, a jerking noise from the administrator behind him. 053 turns the wheel, concentrating for a moment on a curve, trying to suppress his rising panic. 053 mentions the number of events it's caused, but Shujin means how many bodies there have been. 053 knew he wasn't the first. He presumed rather, that the administrator had plucked others from obscurity, other lost souls like himself. But the question was terrifying. How many had there been? Did 001 mean anything? Was it just a name for something else? A test, a coming of age? Shujin smiles at him and says he doesn't know, does he? They don't, usually. The administrator has something on him. Something he wants. 053 feels guilty, as he has barely thought of her this whole time. He replies with his daughter. Shujin nods and says that he's done so much, sacrificed so much to maneuver himself here, to finally be in a position to help her, free her. When he became an 05, donning the blackened suit, stepping into that charcoal room, he thought he'd do it right away. Requisition her, an anomaly required for testing, set her up away from them all, under his protection. Maybe he wouldn't be able to see her, maybe he'd have to stay away, but she'd be free. But there had been that little nagging voice, sitting in that room, whispering to him. Sure, you might get her out. For a day, a month, but sooner or later they'd know what you'd done. They'd come for her. Best to wait. You're not immune, even here. Best to build up your position. Make sure you're safe first. Prove yourself to them. To him. The administrator had sat at the end of the table, staring into him, powering his mind and energy through those dark glasses. It was another refraction, but every beam of light and shade had bounced back on a central point, an icicle stabbing into his brain, scattering it and making it his own. In the present, he shakes himself and says yes. He feels the dampness growing around the corners of his eyes. Shujin nods and pats his arm. He says that he knows. He's seen it all before, and before that too. There is one more great, echoing silence as Yoshihide wipes away his fright, his pain. The trees are taller here, slashing themselves across the windows, bleeding the same dark and the same needles and the same pine freshness that they always do, binding and blinding back into himself as a pit opens up beneath. He knows what's down there. He knows what part of his soul is dwelling there. He asks what happened to the others. Were they free when it was done? But Shujin doesn't answer. Yoshihide, 053, hears nothing more from him. He looks ahead and continues on, through the road as it curves and strains, hacking its way through the night. It's a road that always seems like it'll bend back on itself, take you to where you were before, but it never does. And behind him, his slitted eyes halfway open, the administrator's gaze bores into the back of his skull. The chamber was an office a long time ago. 053 has learned not to think too hard about that. He asked the administrator once who SCP-001 had been. He had not received an answer. A complex of rooms had been built around it. The observation deck looks down from above, towering from one side, like it is clipped outside the world and is examining a scene from a film, but from the wrong angle. The actors, the cocoon, the threads, their newfound friend, will be playing out the little drama without seeing their faces, so high up, staring down below. Standing up here, his hands on the rails, 053 feels a rare, surging power. The ceiling has been replaced with glass. It looks so fragile, the winding silk pressed up against it. Inside it, behind the creeping strands that tie themselves over and over, is a corpse. It's an old corpse now. It cannot be seen, its stench is contained, but it must still be there. Binding and rebinding himself over and over, constantly repeating the same actions, the same phrase. It's not enough to read about it. He watches it stick, shift, move, its pale and sickly limbs reorganizing themselves endlessly, grasping at walls that have no purchase. In the last few years, he has spent so much time here, in this spot. It's like an old friend, a comforting wound. Below him lies an imperfection, an affront to the work, an insoluble problem. He has spent so many hours on it, thinking up new ways to assault the problem. Black chains of cursed iron, the shredded horns of a teetering owl, hooting in anguish and pain as its powdered pride was thrown, urged, pumped into the threads. And nothing happened. And each time, he knew with crystal certainty that it would never work. It would never be contained. Then the idea came to him. It had seemed inevitable. The way the anomaly worked, tugging on people's fingers, slipping into their blood and bone. This was a drama, a grand melodrama, played out again and again. Like Passion Week, or Ashura, or Maga Puja. The same single moment in the past, playing out over and over again, making it real once more while the people flock and preen around. And now he's here. The kindling has been stacked below. He has journeyed forth, seen the world, and now he's returned, standing here at the precipice, the gates at the end of the road. The door behind him opens, and the administrator walks in. 053 nods at him. He almost smiles. Finally, today he wins. Finally, today it will be complete. And Shujin walks in behind him. 053 frowns, confused, and says that he's not meant to be here. He's meant to be in the chamber. The administrator smiles, a smile that widens and widens and widens like the holy blessed moon, white teeth arrayed like tombstones. The first day he came into his office, he had smiled like that. He states that there's been a bit of a change of plan. He wasn't entirely honest about what Shujin is doing here. Shujin himself can't meet his eye. He simply walks over to the rail and looks down. 053 feels the jaw of a trap around him, but he can't tell where, from what. His mind pushes out, confused, unclear. The administrator continues, saying that he's not a Type Q. His skills are something else. As far as he can tell, there's only one Type Q in the country right now. Only one capable of bending truth and lies apart. Yoshihide turns and looks down, frowning again, but more slightly. He says that there must have been a mistake, as that's Yuzuki down there. The administrator places a hand on his shoulder and says, yes, precisely. A Type Q is a blasphemy. That's how he has started to think of it. It's something that shouldn't exist, something that he doesn't want to exist. They may appear to change an object's shape, its size, perform miracles of transformation and transmutation, but in point of fact, they reach into other worlds, other possible branching times. They take what could have been and make it not a lie, but a truth. So say you're sitting in a restaurant, God knows how long ago, and laughing with your daughter. Say she takes a fork and presses it and molds its shape into something else, like a spoon. All she's really doing is looking back at another world, a world where her mother might be alive, her father warm and present, and takes something from that place, barely realizing it. A fork becomes a spoon. A dead hope becomes alive. Yoshihide screams. He rushes across the room, heading for the microphone. Why is it so distant? Why is it where it can't be reached? But the administrator's hand, claw-like, grips him in place, roots him to the floor. He yells at him to let him go, as it's her, and she's not safe. The administrator drags him, with impossible strength, back to the rail. He takes a hand and forces it on Yoshihide's head, making him look down. There, amidst the threads and silk, there is Yuzuki. She's older, thinner. She's lost too much weight, he thinks, between the throbbing screams. Petrified, her back against the wall. The administrator states that they'll do nothing without an order. They didn't tell anyone what they were going to do. The cocoon moves. It shifts in anticipation. It's not harmful to the touch. It consumes slowly, inexorably, its victims picked and plucked from day to day, elsewhere in time and space. The body's dead hand picks according to its own design, shifting from victim to victim. The order hasn't been given. He just won't give the order. He won't. The administrator says that he'll let him go as soon as he wants him to, but he asks if he wants him to. Yoshihide spits in his face and yells for him to let him go now, as he has to get to her. Shujin, however, says that he doesn't. His voice is quiet and resigned. He's holding a notepad, his pen poised above it, leaning over the rail. A lit cigarette wafts behind his ear. He says that he's seen him and noted him, just like he did the others. Yoshihide knows what he wants. The black thread reaches up inside his head, yearning, stretching, breaking. The administrator's hand feels almost warm now, almost comforting. He leans forward and whispers in Yoshihide's ear that there are no other type Qs they have access to. 053 stops struggling. He stops moving. He just looks down into the pit of Yuzuki's haunted face. He knows what will happen now. He sees the lines react, intersect, converge. He sees the point around which it all turns, has always turned. The writhing bodies slathering to the forest floor. The axe rebounding again and again along the wire. He claws, he wails, he pleads with himself, but at last the calm descends. He knows he always wanted this. He wanted the little child bouncing on a minecart to slice the thread entire, to give himself over to hell. He wanted the box, and only the box, forever. The administrator whispers that it's the work. He told him long, long ago. No room for discrimination. They are the keepers of the box. So many years, so much spilt time to contain SCP-001, to burn the cocoon from the inside. He stares down at Yuzuki's face, its mournful oval shape, its black O where her mouth should be. She looks up, and for a second their eyes meet. She is incredulous. She is pleading. She is broken on the wire. She cannot understand what she sees. He places a hand on the glass, the tears washing down his cheeks. Then he looks away, into the dark walls around, the winding chimney of a tower that breathes and breaks around him. He wanted to contain the world. He wanted perfection. And now he's here, sitting by the side of the sea, staring into black. The administrator releases him. 053 straightens his suit, adjusts his tie, and walks to the microphone. He grips it hard and speaks clear and straight into it. Administer Q Alpha. And he forces himself to watch as her blood slams into the wall, as it starts to shift planes and truth and lies, altering the molecules and atoms, confusing the body that screeches and retches against himself. He watches as her form twists and shatters and drowns and burns, all her deaths merging and collecting into one. He sees her possibilities, her lives and unlives, warping into the silk, infusing it, merging into the fine mesh of string and paper that scatters all around forever. The administrator says that now he knows. He is weeping tears of unbridled joy, his hand gripping 053's shoulder. He is supporting himself on 053's weight. Now he sees hell. Now he sees it as an ending, as it truly is. No more suffering for her. In this torture, she doesn't have to think. That burden is lifted. And containment, perfection for them. They've done it. They've ended it. No more. He doesn't know what he's talking about. It's not relevant. It's something else, some mission or journey of its own. He has eyes only for the stars below, ripping into sky and night, twisting on a fulcrum axis until they've worn themselves out, blown like whining bulbs, a lid on the beasts at last. A little brass monkey rears up from the noise, moaning, tearing him to shreds. And then there's another day. 053 returns to his office. He's arranged it in the same way as it was when the administrator first entered it, back at his old site. The walls and furniture are different, yet the same, just the way he likes it. He sits down at his desk and performs 8 hours of consistent, unspectacular work. Yuzuki is there, voiceless, screaming at him, but he ignores her. There are procedures and principles to fix, maintain, induce. Outside, it grows dark, clouds covering the sun. There was no body, but a grave marker has been placed out there anyway. As he returns from lunch, 053 glances at it on the way back to the desk. He hears her wail, but shrugs, wiping his mouth. An egg and cress sandwich. He sits on his chair at the desk, reading his papers. A wall of bodies cascades onto him, moaning, a hunter with a knife leering out at him. He shakes them off himself and continues, sorting the new procedures for an obscure anomaly placed under his jurisdiction. He books tickets for a flight to Brussels as he hurtles down a slope and into an avenue of swords over and over again, his flesh and memory sliced and rent apart. His expression does not change as they pierce his flesh and remold his image. The grave is there, but he has eyes only for the door. He imagines the moment the administrator will enter again. He blinks, and it is years ago, and a secretary, he hasn't learned their names yet, pokes his head into the office. A visitor for him, he said. Yoshihide sits up straight in his chair. This wouldn't be his first encounter with an 05 liaison, and he knows enough to never let your guard down around these people. Liaisons are vipers, persons who had abandoned all. Shujin walks through the door, closing it behind him. 053 stares. He blinks hard and motions his guest to sit. Shujin does, shuffling over, lighting a new cigarette. His eyes burn and crackle, a smile playing around his mouth. 053 asks if something is funny, but Shujin says no and apologizes. He gets nervous, quite often. He never likes having to do this, and he's sorry they deceived him. The smile is a sad one, he concedes. He straightens up and says that he's not bothered. The work was done well. It was a neat containment. The smile doesn't go away, and Shujin apologizes all the same. He knows it doesn't seem like it now, but she was his daughter. That matters for something. Last night he was reviewing some old personnel files. He stumbled across a ghost file, one that someone hadn't deleted properly. The old 053's file. His blood type, it seems, had been B. He asks Shujin what he was there for, what the point of fetching him from his cabin was. Shujin gets up and walks to the window. Why is his cigarette not setting off the smoke alarm? He shrugs to himself. The man is a reality bender of some kind. Who knows what their powers entail? He doesn't, anymore. He says that he was there to record, to act as a witness, a scribe. He keeps the memory of his change. Yoshihide frowns and asks what change. Shujin shoots him a look and is surprised he didn't feel it. It happens to them all in the end. Something breaks in them and they die. Suicide, martyrdom, a desperate bid for revenge. The administrator thinks he's stopped it now, but a nightingale calls to its mate outside. Yuzuki slashes his face with a carving knife. He wipes away the blood and turns back to Shujin, listening to the thin man as his voice turns to a whisper. He says that when it's happened, when you become an 05, really become one, your death is no longer a normal death. It's something else. And he records it in his head and on the page. The administrator thinks he can control the narrative, make it his own. Rashomon, he calls it. Each life stealing from the last, until you reach hell, you reach an ending. He blinks hard, and his hand starts to shake. He says that's never how it goes. The administrator doesn't realize that, but he does. He can write on the face of time, but the words will fade and die all the same. The administrator is a fool, and he doesn't know hell at all. Shujin flicks the cigarette away, heads to the door and turns back, his hand gripping the handle. He says that he couldn't if he tried. He leaves. Yuzuki dies again, frail in his arms. He weeps for her. She dies again, drowning in the swamp. He reaches for her arms and fails. Then she sits inside a carriage in a noblewoman's death as an emperor sneers, willing it on, and he watches, staring, unmoving, as she is choked into a blackened ash. All he is contained within 4 walls. The office is the only reality left to him now. Beyond those doors are mirrors beyond mirrors, Byzantine halls leading back to him, his own self divided along the road. He pats his pockets, but remembers that he already sent the note. He tightens the noose. He makes sure the chair is firm. It has to be firm. It has to fall away just right for this to work. Yuzuki nods at him, encouragingly, her eyes black orbs lost in the mists beyond. He pauses, one hand on the chair. He looks across at her grave, distant, fragile, a stone too far removed to make out the shape of. He stands on the chair for a better look. He sees trees beneath clouds behind the marker. He sees her, opposite him, laughing at his jokes over dinner, swapping stories, each to each. He sees his wife, her figure shaded in the trees, staring up at him. The administrator is standing in his doorway, asking what he's doing. His face is apoplectic. He is terrified, horrified, furious beyond measure. He steps forward, and Yoshihide puts his face into the noose. He yells that he can't do this to him. Not again. Not now. The administrator lurches forward, and Yoshihide lifts one foot. The administrator pauses, sweating, balling his hands into impotent fists. His glasses slip, crashing to the black and marble floor. He states that he made him. Yoshihide stares back, listening. He starts to feel himself in his own throat, bubbling through. He made him like he made the others. He is not exceptional or an exception. He is rote. He took him because his mind was useful to him. Containment as art, as the perfect art. Ridiculous, and yet it was there. He could use him as a lid on the chaos. The wire tightens as Yoshihide pauses, fascinated. The work isn't some paltry fantasy. It's not a game. The administrator's breathing was slow, labored, heavy. It's the only control they have. He bids Yoshihide to come down, as they can talk about this. The arrogance of him, the presumption. Yoshihide asks him what is hell, and the administrator blinks. He repeats the question, and asks where its contours are. His father thought it was dying, but dying implies an ending. He said it was an ending, but he doesn't know anything. He just tries to impose himself again and again on him and all the rest, guessing his little games on his petty little stage. The chair teeters. His nemesis draws in his breath. The corpses wait, ready, stretched almost to the point of bursting. He says that he'll tell him what hell is. Hell is for the living. Hell is ever-changing, ever-adapting, an inferno of their lives. Hell does not stop. Let him show him. And 053 kicks the chair over, watching the administrator recoil, flailing to the floor, sprawling as she had sprawled. 053 kicks and silently yelps, scrabbling at his own throat, and then expires, swinging from side to side like a pendulum. But Yoshihide is exalted. He is in the walls, he is in the air, he creeps up and about and within, red and black and gold. His fire ignites, spreading, rushing in a blinding, screaming pain. He looks up, spreading his arms, burning, burning, burning. Above him is Yuzuki's face, pale and shining, a thing in mourning. She reaches down as he reaches up, feeling the fire lick his soul, catch it, bind him down and down. He extends a hand and feels a taut and snapping thread. Then she is gone, gone forever, extinguished. The administrator flees, and Yoshihide is all alone, reaching out, struggling for a forever lost to him. Alright, so there's quite the story here amidst the rather extravagant and excellent prose. To recap, Yoshihide was a containment specialist, some say the best, and was promoted to site director because of his efforts. Once there, he is met by the administrator of the Foundation, a mysterious and enigmatic figure that Yoshihide didn't even know existed. The administrator takes a special liking to Yoshihide, clearly grooming him for an even higher position. He takes him out to a forest and shows him a mountain of bodies, human and animal, living and dead, and impresses upon him the point that all that matters is containment, no matter the cost, with no exceptions. Unfortunately, Yoshihide's daughter is anomalous, a reality bender of a very rare and useful type. She's taken into containment by the administrator despite Yoshihide's attempts to hide her abilities. The administrator dangles the possibility of her being freed if Yoshihide becomes an 05, which he does. Unfortunately, again, however, once he's an 05, he makes an excuse to hold off on freeing her, fearing how it would look. He decides that it would be better to wait and establish his position, and so she continued to rot in containment alone. Yoshihide was saddled with an anomaly that was extremely difficult to contain, SCP-001, and it turns out that there's been a lot of SCP-001s over the years, and people in his position are always tasked with containing them. He joins the administrator in recruiting Shujin, with Yoshihide believing him to be the type of reality bender needed to finally contain 001. It turns out, however, that his daughter is the one they need to sacrifice in order to contain 001. He freaks out upon learning this, but in the end, he chooses containment over his family. Yuzuki is sacrificed, and Yoshihide sheds his 053 identity before preparing to take his own life. The administrator tries to talk him down, telling him that he made him who he was, and he can't do this to him. But Yoshihide follows through. His body creates a new SCP, numbered 108, and the task of containing it is left to his replacement. I highly recommend reading the Declassification from To Air Divine for a full picture of the story and its references, which I'll link in the description, but I'll attempt to summarize. Many of the events and characters in the article are references to the works of writer Ryunosuke Akutagawa. The most obvious of these is Hell Screen, a short story in which an artist named Yoshihide is commissioned to create works for the Lord of Horikawa. Yoshihide is instructed to create a folding screen depicting the Buddhist hell, and he proceeds to inflict tortures upon his apprentices to envision hell. He eventually asks the Lord to burn a beautiful lady in a carriage so he can finish the screen. The Lord complies, but the woman that is burned turns out to be Yoshihide's own daughter. In the end, the screen is completed, and Yoshihide takes his own life. The parallels there are pretty clear, but the other important story referenced is Rashomon. In that story, a recently fired servant is contemplating whether to starve or to become a thief. He comes across a woman who is stealing hair from dead bodies, which disgusts and infuriates him. The woman tells him that she steals hair to make wigs so she can survive, and she claims that the woman she's taking the hair from currently sold snake meat and claimed it was fish. This was okay though, because it allowed her to survive, and in turn it's okay for her to steal from her. The man then responds that it's okay for him to steal from her then, as it will keep him from starving to death, and he proceeds to steal her robe. A portrait of hell is essentially one big cycle, focused around theft. The administrator started the entire Foundation by stealing something from the anomalous world, which then landed him in this cycle as payback. The administrator wants everything anomalous to be contained, so he grooms certain individuals to exalt containment above everything else. These individuals have to contain an iteration of SCP-001, but in doing so, in neutralizing it, they themselves steal something inadvertently from the anomalous, and become anomalous. This is procedure Rashomon, an inevitability in the cycle. Whenever that 05 then dies, a new SCP-001 is created, a new anomaly for their replacement to deal with, continuing the cycle. The administrator thought that Yoshihide might be able to break that cycle, as he viewed containment as art, a novel concept. He thought that Yoshihide would view containment as above all other things, and he nearly proved it when Yoshihide sacrificed his daughter to neutralize SCP-001. This, however, left Yoshihide with nothing else to live for, and so he took his own life, becoming SCP-001-108. The administrator is certainly villainous in this story, as he continues along this cycle, manipulating and breaking new individuals each time to try and escape the cycle, but he's also a victim of it. He seems to earnestly believe that containing all anomalous things is what's best for humanity, regardless of the cost, and he's stuck in this endless cycle of never being able to fully do so. He ponders what hell is routinely, and he believes hell to be an ending, one that he desperately wants but is not able to attain. Yoshihide tells him, however, that hell is for the living, unique to each person's life, and it does not stop. It's a rather unique tale, and certainly a unique SCP-001 entry, but it's undoubtedly well told. There is no happy ending here, no real resolution, just endless hell for Yoshihide, Yuzuki, the people stuck in Site-01 endlessly burning, and of course for the administrator himself. I'm sure I've said it before about the SCP Foundation, but it's never been truer than here, that the road to hell is paved with good intentions.